What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are on the CannaBuzz podcast today. We have a great episode for you. We're going to be talking all about cloning and seed germination. So if you want to learn more about those things, strap in. We have a great episode for you today. We have Aaron from ATG Acres, and we have Rab from Seattle Chronic Seeds. He's been on the show many times. It's great to have him back. But we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But before we do, I need to give some folks some shout outs. First off, shout out to everyone in the CannaBuzz community. It's our members only community. It's also an app on your phone on iOS, or you can just go to cannabuzz.app in your browser, and you can support us with as little as $4.20 a month. And what that does is it helps send us to conferences and festivals, things like that. So JR can go to things like Emerald Cup. We can get footage at farms and put that up on the channel. It all just helps keep this thing going. And also we send out seeds to our members. We have a sign up sheet in the app, and we send out seeds periodically throughout the year to folks that sign up there. So we'd love to see you over there, and thanks to everyone over there for your support. Also, shout out to lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you want to use an organic IPM spray in your grow, works indoor or outside, check out lostcoastplanttherapy.com or grab their stuff up on Amazon or your local grow store, and let Dirk know that we appreciate his support. And then the last shout out from me before I throw it to JR is going to go out to our friends over at sacred3mushrooms.com. If you want to grow your own mushrooms at home, you can grab a grow kit at sacred3mushrooms.com. Use a code CannaBuzz for a discount, and you can get yourself a little discount there. And they also have links to spores and all sorts of stuff on their site. So everything you can need, including instructions, over at sacred3mushrooms.com. And then I'm going to throw it over to JR for his shout outs.
Thanks, Q. Tiki announcements. He's doing 40% off his whole site for the month of March. And with every order, you get a pack of Yacht Rock, which is Chimera 2 by Pirate Milk. There should be some tasty stuff in there that's amazing. So check out tikiseeds.com. And then one of our friends of the show at Neptune Seed Bank, he did the drop for Candy Truffle for Raw Genetics and Backpack Boys. They had a collaboration, and they recently got a licensing deal for nursery in the state of California. So you'll start seeing more genetics from them being offered. They dropped their Candy Truffles. It's Lemon Cherry Gelato by Black Cherry Gelato. So it's a lot of gelato. And that dropped on the 28th. So you want to check it out and see if some of those are still available at neptuneseedbank.com.
All right, JR, do you want to kick off today's episode?
Sure. Excellent. Today we have Aaron from ATG Acres. He's an organic low-till cannabis farmer in Oklahoma. And he's here today with Rob to talk to us about Eazy plugs and some germination and cloning strategies. So welcome to the show, fellas.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Listen, yes.
Well, as we always kind of start things off, especially when we have folks come on for the first time, we always ask them how they fell in love with the plant and how it's helped gotten them where they are today. So we'll hit you with that one, Aaron.
I fell in love with the plant kind of a weird way. I mean, it was kind of like the only light in a really dark place. And we weren't calling it medicine. It was just sort of an escape. It was a way to not feel the regular shit. And the regular shit was not so good. So I was self-medicating when I was like 13 or 14 and just fell in love with the plant. And it's pushed me as much as I've looked for it. It's been a really, it's a calling. It's a destiny with this plant.
So JR has notes here that you're a grower, right? So could you tell me more about what your grow is? Is that ATG Acres? Just give us kind of the backstory there. And then, our audience is growers, so they always love to learn about how you grow. So your grow style.
Right on. We are what I call low till organic living soil. We till sometimes, usually about once a year. That's why that I use that moniker. It's just to distinguish us from the no-till guys. You know, there's that no-till is a sort of a different system where there's a lot of cover crops and things like that, and that can be really beneficial. It's just when you want to incorporate a high level of science, those variables can skew results in really unpredictable and even undesirable ways, especially with IPM even. So for that reason, we do low till, and I till if the soil tests tell us to, you know, if media density is high or if we've got dry pockets in the soil or uneven distribution of materials or something. I started growing outdoors. Well, I've been growing for many years. I think it's 18 years now, but you know, I've done indoor, outdoor, but I spent 10 years growing in California doing mostly outdoor, some indoor. And I learned how to do organic farming because it was cheaper. And I brought that with me here to Oklahoma when I built the facility and just took all of my practices outdoor, indoor, and spent more time fine tuning them. You know, there's less room for error inside. So like when you're playing with living soil inside, there's so many things that can go wrong. And we've seen them all, or we've seen a lot of them. And I consider that to be a lucky thing because we're small. So it's easy to learn from our mistakes and bounce back. And, you know, because it's so cheap to grow with organics, you have some wiggle room to make some mistakes.
Do you find that nutrient cycling is something that you're always chasing? And also, are you doing IMO and foliar applications?
I sometimes do foliar applications. I don't tend to use IMOs indoors, just because it brings some complications. You know, indigenous microorganisms are beneficial when you're growing outside, I found. And the best way to get IMOs is actually just using some native soil. That said, you know, foliars are sometimes necessary when you are trying to chase nutrient cycling in the soil, especially with things like phosphorus and sometimes even calcium and magnesium. Under LEDs, especially, what I've found is under high wattage, we have 1,000 watt LEDs, and under those intense lights with CO2, they are magnesium hungry, and so we oftentimes find ourselves chasing the ball on the magnesium. And the phosphorus happens on just the OG strains. So like, you know, your candies and the tight new stuff doesn't seem to need that long-term phosphorus release, right? Because it only flowers for 8 or 9, 10 weeks, where your OGs, your green weed, will go for 10 to 12 weeks. And come week 8 or 9, they're out of phosphorus, but they still want to put on weight. And you'll start seeing that, especially in a highly driven system with high CO2 and high wattage LEDs. So we have found that to be a problem. And so what you do to kind of fix that, it's a proactive thing. You know, you have to be preventative, not curative. And so you're thinking when you're adding a fertilizer, you're thinking about how long is this going to take to break down in my system, which is different for every system. And the only way to know that is through soil tests. And then, you know, at what point do I need to add it again? And that changes. Temperature affects that, moisture level. We shut down our room to remodel the place for 4 months. Soil got all dried out and everything, the soil dynamics changed completely. So it took months to get the soil back into, you know, doing what it was supposed to do. There's a lot of challenges there, chasing that nutrient cycle.
So
go ahead, Q.
Okay. So when I jumped on the Zoom and I saw Rab here, I was confused for a second because I didn't expect to see him here. So give us the backstory. How do you know Seattle Chronic Seeds?
I have looked up to Rob for a very long time. Going back like 10 years, like when he first started his Instagram and I saw him explode and get to like 100,000 followers and just putting out some incredible work. And I mean like scientifically advanced work, you know, where he's using rigorous scientific method to determine, you know, what to breed with. That was special. And then when I moved to Oklahoma, I wanted to do a big pheno hunt. And I started with local. I wanted to look for people in my area. And I didn't even realize he had moved to Oklahoma, like maybe around a little bit before I did. And I'm like, I feel like this is destiny. Can we please hang out? Can we please be friends? And I was like, I want to buy a bunch of seeds. I was like, you know, but I want you to pick them, tailor them to my, you know, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for funky profiles. Remember I told you I'm looking for like nasty, farty shit. Like I want the funkiest stuff you got. And he stirred up some fart nasty stuff, dude. I mean, that mustard on that Anthony Bourdain is insane. So he comes over to the property and with his family, and hands me this box of custom, you know, it's like got the custom fucking ATG on it. And it's like breeder's pack. And I'm like, all right, what do I owe you? He's like, nothing. I was like, did we just become best friends? Yup. And the rest was history, dude. And we've been just working together. You know, when I can, I help him pheno hunt and, you know, return those back to him, and he turns those around. And now we're even working together on, I've created a separate seed line. I found wild hemp here in Oklahoma. That might be a whole nother story. We can touch on that if you want, but I decided that I wanted to breed it with some of the stuff that Rob had given me. And so I did that, and he wanted to do it too at the same time. He actually did it before I did. You got the pollen and you did stuff before I did. So you bred with it first. And then now I've got a whole line of it. We call No Hope Dope Seeds, but he's been my mentor through the whole thing. Like, hey, Rob, how do I, you know, germinate seeds? And by the way, I know he goes by Rab. I call him Rob because, you know, sometimes I call him by his Christian name, but, he is the captain, but, yeah, he has shown me the way the whole way through, man. Like if, you know, his hydrogen peroxide to water mix, he has to share with you guys because that's a phenomenal trick that has shown a lot of success. All of the seed germination questions that you had in the preparatory interview stuff, that's going to be leaning on Rob because he knows his stuff with seed germination. I'm the clone guy.
Well, let's get to it because, you know, I've known Rob for a long, probably almost a decade now. And I always approached him at the trade shows as a fanboy, and he was always generous with his offerings. And I knew back then that he was far, far ahead of the curve. I mean, he was doing shit 10 years ago that people are just now talking about. And so he's so far ahead of the curve, you know, I think it was almost to his detriment because he was focusing so hard on type 2s and all these other cannabinoid profiles within these cultivar offerings that, you know, I almost think it was to his detriment sometimes. But man, a passion for the plant is undeniable. And so our first section is seed propagation. And so I'll go ahead and start with you, Rob. Tell us some of the advantages of direct sowing seed outdoor versus starting seeds indoors.
So a lot of it is honestly vigor and resistance. I mean, everything just acclimates. Like once you get it into the dirt physically, it has the rhizosphere that, you know, once it touches down, basically it's ready to go. And then I'm kind of brutal on especially outdoor seedlings because a lot of times if they're not performing, I'll just go kick them over. And it's kind of one of the things where I look for the most vigorous plants. And then once you do find things that start growing up, I mean, they tend to be more pest resistant or tolerant to, you know, certain fungal infections or whatever's in the area specifically. And so they kind of develop this resistance by doing a direct sow outside, just being acclimated directly, to where you're at. And so a lot of it, I find it beneficial for outdoor plants just to start them direct. So sometimes I'll do the germination inside where I throw them in a cup, and just, especially for pathogens, like I'll start with 70-30 hydrogen peroxide, just kind of clean the seeds, and then, throw them outdoors. But with probiotic breeding, or, I guess whatever you would want to call it, biointelligent, using living soil, basically it's like a handshake to where they recognize the dirt right when they touch it. They just shake hands, and then it's off to the races. And so that's one of the reasons why direct sow outdoors with, specifically probiotic seeds, it's on another level, because it's like, I've done research where I've had, different people's seeds and whatnot, and it's like literally every time I've done those types of seeds, they outperform everything in terms of like vigor, growth, resistance to pathogens, pests. The list goes on and on, but it's really how I prefer to do things when going outdoors, if you're doing direct sow.
So there's really something to the probiotic seed production, and I want to stir your memory, Rob. Do you remember when I ran that test with that company with the organic root enhancer? And your strains did better with the organic root stimulant than the alternative strains that I was testing. Do you remember that? That was the most unique finding from that study that I did.
And so with
something again, go ahead.
With a direct sow, I was also told that you're also more tolerant to the light, like the fact that it's maybe not getting the light cycle that it would, normally get in an indoor situation, because it is so young in its life. It's not, gonna veg out flower kind of thing. Or actually go right into flower, then veg, and then flower.
Right.
No, I think that's pretty spot on, honestly, because you have to harden them off generally if you start indoors, just because the sun, depending on the intensity, the sunlight's intensity, a lot of the plants can freak out. And so having it directly sown and, coming up, being used to the sun's direct input to it, it just seems to take off and not have those sensitivity issues.
So I've been, I grow in my backyard, and I've experimented with like direct sowing or like auto flowers, things like that. And the issues that I've had with direct sowing little seedlings as, as a home grower is kind of protecting the little seedlings from whatever that could be, I guess, like wind or whatever, but also, at least in my backyard, snails and slugs, especially like after you water and things like that. So I've had to kind of like come up with ways to protect the little seedlings to keep them alive, especially for those first couple weeks when they're so small and especially susceptible for, one big munch and that thing is gone. So I was curious if you have any like pro tips for home growers, because especially for home growers, like every little seed that they lose is like a decent chunk of change. So I'd just be curious if you have any pro tips.
Clear solo cups, man. If you can find they're clear plastic solo cups, you throw it on top of it. Generally, it acts like a little greenhouse, and you kind of have to pull it off and work with it. But a lot of times, especially at night or when you have to step away, just throwing them on, because a lot of times you'll come up and you'll see slug trails or things like that. And so one of the things that I started to do was just throwing clear cups and making like a little greenhouse for them to where they're not affected. I mean, sometimes you'll still get like gophers or random things that you have no control over, but I mean, that's just Mother Nature.
Yeah, we always say Mother Nature always takes its cut.
You got to grow one for Mother Nature.
Yeah, word. Pour out a little for the mother.
Yeah, that's it, baby. For gophers and weasel or gophers, moles, and whatever those other things are called. We did quarter-inch and half-inch hardware fabric under your planting medium. And so it just costs a little extra, but run under your greenhouse or under your potting area.
You ever run the Coke bottles like dug into the dirt for the whistling?
Say it again.
Like the Mexican Cokes or just any glass bottles, how you dig a hole and set them in there for the whistling or whatever to like scare them off.
That's
nice.
Cool.
That's another
that
thing.
Is cool.
It's an old method that like a farmer who was dealing with it, and I was like, why the hell do you have glass bottles spaced? And he explained that to me, and like I tried it out and I didn't have any issues with them pulling vegetables or things like that. So it's an old farmer's deal.
Yeah,
that's wild.
When we moved into my grandparents' house, my grandpa, he would put labels for the plants. He would put them in like, 'cause back in the day, their pill bottles were like little glass vials. And so I think he would put labels for what the plants are. He'd put them in the glass vials and then he would bury them. So when we moved in to my grandparents' house, we were just finding these little glass bottles all over the backyard for a while. It was wild. That's what you just made me think of. Well, let's see. Eazy Plug. What is Eazy Plug? I don't have the spiel, but I see a whole section about Eazy Plug. So give me the fill in on that. And then how does that relate to seed sowing?
Well, so Eazy Plug, man, it is, when things come together, like in a perfect storm, they come together in a perfect storm. And so being a small farm, I often look for sponsorships. I'll often reach out to companies to try and get them to send me free stuff, and I'll promote it. And if I like it, I'll promote it. And so Eazy Plugs was that. I didn't see them anywhere available, but it looked like in the UK, people were having success with them. So I hit them up and asked them if they would do something with me. And they said, okay. They sent me a small box. And so I'd been using like Root Riot and Rapid Rooters for many years. I mean, many years. And like, they used to be really good. And then over time, the peak quality went down and they stopped. I mean, we went from like 90 to 100% success rates to like 50 to 60%. And I went to the Aero cloner, to the Eazy cloner, and did that for a few years, and that was successful. But we always had this transitional slowdown when those water roots hit the living soil. It seems like they just transition really slowly. And so I hit up Eazy Plugs, and they were like, "We'll send you some," and they were just so successful. We had 99%. After getting we had 100% up until like the fourth tray of plugs where we lost one clone. And I was just astonished. So I talked to Jennifer on the phone, and like we established like what the business relationship would be like. And like, so basically I started managing their clients and trying to help with people that were having problems with their plugs because I had so much success with them. And just as in exchange, they would just send me plugs. And it's been really good. We've helped a bunch of people. But before I started helping people, I was like, dude, these are such good plugs to Rob. And he tried them. And that's where a good product is a good product. I don't want to just take products from anybody and put them out there. But this is the best plug that I've ever tried.
So you've got like a tray that you're putting these in. You've got a tray of plugs, right? And then you're putting the seeds in
They're prepackaged trays.
Oh, okay, cool.
They come in individual and prepackaged. And I use them with the FloraFlex trays. I'm working with Jenny to design new trays for the future that are more like those FloraFlex trays, just because they have a lot of advantages. They have
she sent me 2 trays, and I used them for germinating seed. And I had 100% success, to the point that I had accidentally, when I was doing some of the Thai basil seeds, they're so tiny and shit, you drop more than you're supposed to. And holy shit, I had sprouts coming out of everywhere that I had to call out of there. And I had never done seed sowing in, plugs like that before, and it was really easy. I just got myself a seed mat with thermostatic control. I got the Grodan insert. I put that in my tray, filled up the bottom till it was about halfway up the Grodan. Then I put her tray right on top of that and started sowing my seeds. And holy shit, dude, it was like, and I did a side by side. I had rapid rooters and I had the Eazy plugs, and I put the chili peppers in there. And all of my chili peppers and the Eazy plugs were, I'd say 3 to 4 days quicker than the rapid rooters. It took them a lot longer to start sprouting.
That was pretty much your experience, right, Rob? Like, did you direct sow, or did you try them for cloning first?
No, so she had me do both, and so that was kind of the thing. That she sent me a box as well with a bunch of the pyramids and different things to try out from seed sowing, just to kind of see how they work. And then I had to do direct cloning, and the thing that like really sold me on them was the actual time for rooting. So like in a nursery setting, you're used to like 14, 15 days maybe. That's usually the average with root rights to get, enough to where you can pull them and get them out to customers. And so we had, in order for like 8,000 or 10,000 clones that I had to do for a consultation for, essentially. And so the guy was like, I can't do that. And so I was like, I can. Like, so we got root rights, and they ended up being garbage. Like, I think we got 60%, and then I had to do my little magic tricks, and I think I pulled like 84%, 85%, something like that. But it blew his mind, because I mean, he had like root aphids and all kinds of shit. That's a whole different story. But I requested another set, and so they sent me a bunch of them, and I kind of had a similar problem afterwards on a 5,000-6,000 order. And so I was pissed at that point, and I didn't want, and that's kind of after, I think, at the point where you reached out and were like, hey man, I have these. And so I ran some Rockwool, I ran root rights, and I ran those, and just kind of the same simple thing I do, pH, aloe EM1, and literally in 4 days I had roots on them. And I called you, and I was like freaking out. I was like,
yes.
Do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? Like, I literally half my time, 50%, I can I'm going to get double the output per year in a nursery setting. And so it's like, to be able, especially when you're doing volume, it's like, it gives me goosebumps. Like, I have goosebumps right now talking about it. It was one of those things where beautiful.
It was. And for me, it was 6 days. And I remember the 6th day, I checked, because I was like, there's no way. Like, I never see roots at 6 days. And they were already like wizard beards. And I was like, oh shit, I missed the mark. Like, but always by day 9, like and it's my 2 weekers, like, or 3 weekers, like the ECSD, it's 3 weeks usually. 9 days, like, it's ready to go into a solo cup. It's unreal. I don't know how I don't know what they've done. It's just that it's a really high quality peat. It's all like an organic polymer. And these things break down so fast
too.
Yeah.
That's what I like about it.
Short.
Too. Yeah.
Short, compact, and the way that you do the cuttings. And that's my first thing, was because I'm used to a uniform, tray. And so she was like, you need to cut them shorter. And I was like, that's against everything that I want to do. And so I started taking them small, and it just makes sense because they respond and the drybacks happen at a quicker rate than the other plugs. And so it's like, it only takes, especially when just pHing water. I mean, that was the magic, where she was like, just try it without it. And like, that was still 8-9 days, like you said, just pH water, no additives. And I contacted her again, was like, I need another box, because this is like, this is working out really well. Same thing with the seed sowing in them. It was just like, where they kind of responded almost identical to doing in living soil, especially when I used the aloe EM1 to kind of jumpstart it. I mean, my seed, like, usually I'll have about a 60% after I go through and cull everything, the mutants, the weirdos, the things, the runts that I mean, I had 100% thrown through, and it was like you said, JR, I was like, oh my gosh, I have too much. Like I planned for 60 to 70%, and I have 100 for like
Dude,
5 trays, and I'm freaking out. I don't know where I'm going to put all these.
This has been my issue, is adapting, is like getting over the paranoia of the old ways where I had to take 5 to 10 cuts of my mother to get one guaranteed rooted clone. I'm taking 2, bro. And 2 is too many. I always am throwing away. I take 1 top and 1 off near the top, because bottoms, you don't even have to worry about. You remember we used to take bottoms because you got to get one that roots? Doesn't matter. Yeah. They root faster from the top in Eazy plugs. I shit you not. I mean, you can cut them 3 inches tall. You can cut them 6 inches tall, whatever fits in your tray. And we've had success all across the board. Like Rob was saying, any pH, my pH here at the facility is 7.9. Sometimes I don't pH them and they do just fine, as well as they do when I 5.9 them.
That's crazy too. That's kind of mind blowing in itself. One of the common problems that folks have is when their shoots come up, sometimes they get a little tippy and they don't support themselves. Do you guys have any good pro tips for fragile sprouts?
I bet Rob does.
I think so. With the Eazy plugs, I didn't really have, so like a lot of it has to do with them burrowing and trying to establish roots, and then they kind of get wonky and start growing up towards the light and kind of start bending over. And the thing with Eazy plugs is like the shallow depth, they just tend to take hold and kind of have a sturdy trunk more so. They're not as flimsy. The other thing is just having your lights, not full bore, having the correct spacing. A lot of times if your lights are too high, they're trying to reach, and so you'll get those long, lanky ones that'll kind of like S-bend or just tilt over and then create, a weird profile. And so a lot of it has to do with just, how much space you have in between them and the lights as well.
We had a runt with our last, we did a little seed hunt, some peanut butter souffle, and we had a runt in the paper towel, and I put it into the Eazy plug and it caught up. And this was it was a month behind by the time I put it in the Eazy plug, and it caught up where it's almost the same size as the other phenos. And I was going to say what's the solution is really putting them in an Eazy plug.
And that has to do with the water retention and air ratio, right?
I think so, yeah. And the density, the media density is really, there's the right amount of push from that taproot. Like it requires enough and doesn't resist too much. It's just remarkable. And then they have a really nice dry back. Cannabis likes a dry foot. And so probably the biggest problem people have with the plugs is not realizing that they had dried out. And then 2 days later they throw roots, because that's actually an old trick, is letting your plugs dry out.
Interesting. Let's see. I wanted one last kind of pro tip from you, Rab, in terms of taking seedlings outside. So you mentioned hardening off. So I've done a bit of that myself, where I like to start my plants inside because it's just like less chaotic or whatever it is. I'll start it in a cup or something like that. And then I've done things where I have some trees in my backyard, so I put them outside under the trees for a while. But I'm curious if you have any pro tips that you just learned over the years on how you could, if you do choose to start inside, how you can kind of move those seedlings outside.
Absolutely. So it really depends on the size of them too, but I just call it the windowsill technique. And so a lot of it is having windowsills that are open. And so they'll get the sun's UVs. A lot of times you can crack the windows so they kind of get the wind as well. But just finding depending where you're located, something that gets light the majority of the day. And so then you can kind of see from inside and remove it. If it's starting to freak out, you can kind of pull it back, put it to its original space, or in a shady area or back in your grow room. But a lot of times I'll do windowsills for a few days, maybe a week, and then I'll kind of start moving it to the outside, pulling it back in if it's still having an issue. But that's kind of the thing that I really like to do, and I feel like it's working.
Interesting. Yeah, in my backyard I have a fig tree, and so what I do is I put them under the fig tree, and I'll put them there for the better part of a week. I've found that they need to have kind of in that in between sunlight area, I guess, before you just put them in their full blast, because otherwise they do not like going directly out in the sun.
No, yeah, having some sort of shade is a must.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about clones, JR. Do you want to kick off the clone section?
Sure. I think, we kind of want to talk about some of the pros and cons of some of these methodologies. But at the same time, I'd also kind of like to hear how each of you approach each of these things. Obviously, the advantage of cloning is that you're getting a replica of what you started with. And it's also a good way to be able to back things up if you find things amazing. So kind of give me, if you don't mind, a little breakdown of, the materials you use and how you get down. And I'll start with you, Rob.
So I have a few different ways. Generally, the organic way. Usually, I'll use top cutting. So I'll look for tops. Generally, take them, 3 to 4 inch cuts at a 90-degree angle. I tend to have a razor per plant, and so with HLVD and transmission rates. If you're not able to buy, disposable razors, then having a cup with bleach and water to put your scissors or shears in. Do a 2-3 minute soak after, every plant, just to ensure that you don't have any transmission between plants. Usually I'll take a few cuts, I take a few extras, and then I send out samples just to retest for HLVD. It's a big part of the process, especially with nurseries nowadays. Then after that, I'll do a dip into salicylic acid or aloe. After an aloe dip, I'll generally dunk them. A lot of times I just use a Jadam wetting agent, JWA. It's basically a salt that kills off any pathogens, anything like that. And then if not that, I'll do a sulfur dunk, and then I'll plug them. A lot of times I pH the water to, like Aaron said, 5.8, 5.9, and then I make an aloe EM1. I'll add a little bit of that to the mix, and that's generally how I do them. For people who have like rock wool or other things, and things not directly with Eazy plugs, or salt-based, there's other methods that I can go more in depth to, but that's generally the light organic way that I just like to do for 98% of my stuff.
JR, you're on mute, buddy.
Sorry. Aaron, how do you set up your domes and how do you get down?
I pretty much very similar to Rob. I've kind of fine-tuned some of that stuff a little bit more with just making it cheaper, and in terms of Rob takes a shit ton of clones too, but we're in a commercial facility where we have the OMMA inspecting us and stuff like that. That said, we do you do that, Rob? Do you have a commercial license or just nursery? Just ag, right?
Anymore.
Okay.
Yep.
So he's got a nursery license. So which is what we also have, but we also have the cannabis facility within it. So in terms of, I'll just like tweak on a few things. So the bleach solution, we do a 20% solution. I read a study showed 20% bleach to water for 1 minute killed 99% of viruses and viroids, and for 10 minutes killed 99.9%. So it's super effective at 20%. That said, we soak our scissors. I have Chickamauga scissors. We soak those. We soak the blade between uses. Everything gets at least a minute between uses to kill 99%. And then the Chickamaugas, that joint in the scissor will start to rust. It's just, you kind of like have sacrificial items when you're trying to take care of your plants there in that way. And then I usually cut my clones a little bit bigger just so I can have a head start in flower. And then, so like maybe 5 inches, 6 inches. And the FloraFlex trays allow that. They got the taller domes. I really like the FloraFlex trays I mentioned earlier. They have more ventilation on the sides of the insert. So you have that tray insert, and you can slide it around in there. So there's less chance of algae growth. And then the way the dome is shaped, it like cycles water back down into the bottom tray instead of raining down on the plants, which is really beneficial because you can control the moisture level in the cubes better, the plugs better.
Nice.
And then my dome SOPs are pretty straightforward. You leave it close. You don't touch it for the first 4 days. Make sure you soak the plugs. There is like this misconception that you don't have to soak them. It's a light soak. You need to definitely get them in the water for about a minute in your 5-9 water and then use them. Don't squeeze them out. Just put them in the tray and then kind of shake the tray out.
So when you get the pre-done tray and they're already in the tray that it comes with, you're not popping them out and soaking them, are you? Or are you just top soaking?
If I were to use that tray, I would just put them in so basically I put them in their whatever tray they're going to be in, and I would pour 5-9 water over them like I was watering plants. Yeah. And then until it touched the bottoms of the plugs, and I would let it sit for about a minute while I prep my other materials, like my, cloning, the clone solution I use, Dip and Grow, just because it's cheap. And then, prep the rest of my stuff, and then we leave the dome and the vents closed for 4 days. Then we open it a quarter every day thereafter until it's all the way open. And then with the FloraFlex domes, you can actually slide them to the side so that the nubs, they rise up a little bit. There's like nubs on them. So like if you slide the dome to the side, it kind of rises up, gives more ventilation in there. And I think other than that, that's like kind of the general synopsis. And I use like an X-Acto blade, and I throw away the blade every time.
Yeah, these are all really good pro tips. I think sometimes these are the things that people kind of struggle with, when they're trying to get this down. Because I know that clone domes, they say are super simple, but if you don't have, the right parameters in place, it can actually be, like you said, you used to have to cut a lot more to guarantee you were going to get what you needed. So when you're developing these strategies with the Eazy plug, you're already in the mindset of being able to produce these cuts at a much faster rate. And so that helps you with all of your, cycling. Do you find that sometimes when you get into that situation, you're looking to, kind of get ahead of yourself?
I mean, that's kind of the goal, I guess, is to get as far ahead as possible, because you can always get further ahead, but it hurts to get further behind. I mean, there is a too far ahead. You can bite yourself in the ass on that one, but with the Eazy plugs, it's just so much easier to be consistent and plan so that you're not too far behind or too far ahead. I know for a fact those plugs are going to be in soil in 10 days. Without a doubt, 99% of them are going to be in, 49 out of 50 out of that tray is in soil in 10 days, every time.
Something else I wanted to touch on too about I didn't say anything about the domes, but just kind of how I was able to achieve roots at a little faster rate with the Aloe EM1. The other thing is not using the FloraFlex. So if you just have conventional floppy China trays or whatever you want to call them, in just conventional domes. So I'll dome it the first day. I'll come inspect. Second day, I usually pull the dome off and just give it a quick fanning to let some fresh oxygen in. Throw the dome back on for a second day. And then the third day is when I start my cracking. And so I'll start opening at quarter turns on day 3. And every day I'll still kind of pull the lid up and fan, some fresh air in. And then just wait for the initial dry back. And it seems like about 4 days, 5 days, they'll be really, kind of where they're set and dry, especially with those domes that retain a lot of moisture. And so that's where I started seeing them in about 5-6 days, is kind of just by, I know Jennifer told, usually about 4 days. I always like to experiment and, do stupid things. And so it's like, I just started playing around and trying different methodologies on different trays. And I found that to be a little bit faster on, the cheaper stuff or whatever that I was trialing.
I will say that one problem I've had, a big problem we've had with one of the clients is dry rooting powder versus like a liquid rooting solution. Dry doesn't seem to, when the plugs dry out, the plants wilt faster if the rooting solution is a dry powder. So make sure it's a liquid.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, you said you use Dip and Grow, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to look that up.
It's so cheap
for commercial. Like, it's probably the thing with salicylic, it's not always guaranteed, especially you don't know the client. If you have like a plant that is been successful for you, which, all my aloe plants at home, I have specific ones. But if I don't use aloe, it's Dip and Grow. That was going to be the other thing that I was going to say, is that, you can root anything off of it. So.
And when it's not Dip and Grow for me, it's aloe every time. I actually have an aloe plant in the veg room. And when it's like, you gave me a clone the other day and I didn't want to make up a whole Dip and Grow solution, just put it in there for a minute and then took it out and plugged it, roots in 6 days.
Okay.
See, for me, what I found was that the rate I clone at, I would need a farm of aloe vera plants just to keep up with my cloning.
Yeah,
I got some big ones, man.
They grow fast.
Yeah.
There are
always
inconsistencies.
Throwing them in new ones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one last question I had on this topic before we move on, I think, to aeroponics and stuff like that. So I've been thinking about this lately because I'm going to clone some of my plants and mess around with trays, everything that we've just been talking about. So last pro tips is, how much spacing do I have between my clones, I guess? Because like as a noob, I'm worried about, I guess, having too much stuff in there and it creating like a bad environment for air or whatever and moisture. And then I also kind of tend to worry about if the leaves are touching the dome, and just, I guess I'm worried about like clutter. So tell me, what should I worry about?
I've experimented with a lot of different approaches on this, the checkerboard approach and everything in the book. Really what it comes down to is you want to get your money's worth out of every tray, right? So why do less if more do better, if more do as well as less, right? So fill the tray. You're not going to have any problems with some of them rooting at a different ratio. There was also a study done a few years back that showed, I think it was in 19, that showed it was about clone stalk diameter, cutting the leaves, which is something that a lot of people do mistakenly. Because it really does inhibit rooting. So don't cut your leaves. Don't worry about mold in your clone tray, because it takes mold longer to grow than these are going to root. These are going to root in 10 days. Mold, algae will start to develop on the tops at day 14, day 15, that kind of thing. But they're out of there by then, and your living soil microorganisms are going to then fill that hotel room, sort of, so to speak, and algae won't grow and mold won't grow. But that said, it's a short period of time, right? That's the goal. That's why it's so safe to just fill that thing. Don't cut the leaves. Make sure the leaves aren't touching the plugs. So no low leaves. Everything's got to be an inch away from that tray.
Say too. You want to make sure that you strip everything out.
Yep.
Sorry, I was on mute again. So we're kind of move into the aeroponics side of things. You had mentioned you'd had some practice with that, or you had used it for a while. What did you find some of the pros and cons of aeroponic versus clone dome type stuff?
For me, aeroponics produced a lot of roots very fast. We saw big calluses, and it's really fun to watch. You can actually see it develop right on the plant. But there's this transitional period where when you transplant them into living soil, it may be different for synthetic media, but living soil, it's like you can almost see them. They kind of wilt out for a few days, and then they bounce back, but it takes some time. Didn't find that to be the case with the Eazy plugs.
One thing I'm having a problem with as I'm coming out of my aeroponic cloner into 2-gallon living soil pots. I'm noticing my stems off the gate are a little thin. They're not as thick. Do you have any pro tips for that to thicken my stems?
Hardening off.
All right.
We are nearing. Okay, so yeah, but let's really dive into this. You take the dome off and you put a light breeze on them for 10 minutes a day in the last 3 days of them being in the dome. So like day 7 to 10, you put a light breeze on them for 10 or 15 minutes, and you'll have a lot thicker girth.
And so I was also referring to aeroponic wise, coming out of the aeroponic cloner into living soil.
Same deal.
Same deal.
Yeah. Just if you don't have do you use a dome with your Eazy cloner? Some people do, some people don't.
I do not. So they're hardened off from the gate pretty much to what my room is, which is around, I like to keep it at 70% humidity. I got a humidifier to kind of keep my vegerum in check, because we have swings in the winter where it's super dry and cold, and then we have swings in the summer where it's super dry and warm, and so I have to have supplemental humidity. But something I'm finding is when I noticed that when they take off in the 2-gallon pot from the aeroponic cloner, my stems are not as girthy,
spindly. Yeah. My first, soil test is the first thing you would want to do, because you need to see if you're deficient in things like calcium or boron, the things that bolster like plant cellular structure, those sorts of nutrients. And then if you're not, you may go into a smaller pot. You may have success letting plants kind of root out into like a red cup, like a solo cup first. And once they hit the bottom, pot them into a larger pot. I have the most vigor from letting roots show on the outsides when you take it out, and then disturbing them and putting them into a slightly larger pot. We go red solo cup, 1 gallon, 3 gallon, 10 gallon.
And on the
topic, I feel like that's pretty spot on. Is just going to like smaller media initially instead of 2 gallons. A lot of times, if I do aeroponics, I directly go to a solo cup and then let it establish its roots in there before moving on to a larger pot.
Let that handshake start smaller.
Brilliant. Love it. I think that's great, because I think these are all things that new growers struggle with, especially as they're trying to get off the crack bottles. You know what I mean?
One last tip on the aeroponics kind of side of things. Would love for you to just kind of walk through, I guess, maybe you could kind of summarize it as pro tips for doing aeroponics cloning. JR's done it quite a bit. I've done it a bit in the past. It can be easy to fuck up, especially if you're not like cleaning things up diligently. So just curious if you could share some pro tips for folks.
pH your water. has, you need to be at 5'9". One of the larger you go with these Eazy cloners, into the like 160 site Eazy cloners, the warmer the water is going to get because of the pump, that dump pump, that sump pump that sits in there, is going to get hot, make the water hot from friction. So I used to throw ice cubes in my thing, once every 24 hours, I would throw 2 ice cubes in there, and I would check the temp, and I'd make sure, and I don't remember what temp we used to run. Maybe it was like 75 or something. I don't remember.
I think so, but it gets up to 80 plus on those larger size ones. I mean, it can get to like 85, 88. Like you can see the bacterial growth stuff.
Oh yeah, biofilm all over the walls. Anytime you really got to get a clean hand and feel the inside of the water space in there and the reservoir, and make sure that there's no biofilm. And if there is, you need to take the freaking top out, take it to your sink, scrub it down, put it back in. They'll be fine for 10 minutes while you clean it.
I usually reset every time. Like I'll do a clean maintenance and reset every time. But one thing I've noticed over the years, and I think people sometimes have problems with this, is the slime out. What would you say is causing the bottom of that cutting to get kind of slimed out?
Depends on it depends on the circumstance. If an embolism occurs, water's going to gather on the outside. That could be the case. And that will create that sludge. If it's too far away from a sprayer, or if it's too close,
too close, I was going to say.
Yeah, because it has to be perfect. Often we used to design our own, you get 1/2-inch PVC pipe and just design your own, buy your
manifold,
own little sprinklers. Yeah.
Yes.
Because you could design a better manifold. Yeah.
Much better. Yes. I agree with that. We actually modified 5-gallon buckets in the beginning, and just built our own manifolds that way.
Seen those. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did 22-gallon Bumblebee totes once. That did not work out. They lose their structure. It gets bad.
Yeah, I could see that, because by the time you cut out all the holes, there's not a lot of structure left.
Exactly.
So now,
yeah,
go ahead, Q. Get us into the next one.
Sorry, JR. So we're gonna like wrap up the episode with the section about Eazy plugs. While you guys were talking earlier, I was looking it up on the web. So before we get too far, do you have any pro tips for where I could get it as a home grower? Because I was like having difficulty figuring out where to find it.
They do have a retail supplier they're working with now.
Okay.
Let me look it up. It's like,
okay. I'll let you do that. Oops,
is it quality? No, I found. Yeah, I think it's Quality Horticulture.
Okay.
Oh, great. I hope it is. Hope I'm not plugging the wrong one. Yeah, there it is. It's Quality Horticulture, is the Instagram. You can find them at qualityhort.com.
Okay, great.
Yep. Or just reach out on Instagram if you're a commercial grow. Home growers, reach out on Instagram, share your experiences. Jenny's really sweet, and she loves to hear success stories with stuff. So.
Okay, so we'll go on there. We'll pick some up. And when I was looking at the site, I noticed you've got trays. I noticed there's like bags of like 100 or 50. So there's individual ones. There's different size of trays. But just for folks that are listening or watching, could you help us kind of visualize what it is? Earlier, you kind of talked it through a little bit, but just kind of refresh us again. It's not like a little bit of soil, and like we've seen with maybe some others, it looks like it's something a little bit differently. What is that?
Yeah, it's I'll pull up my my brochure here, but I'll tell you off the top of my head, it's like a peat moss with an organic polymer, and very simply put, I think they probably explain it much more eloquently Yeah, okay. So it's predetermined EC, pH levels, self-regulates airflow and water ratio, strongly bonded organic components. They're certified organic in like the Netherlands or something, but they're they're new to the US. So like they literally just started releasing plugs to home growers that weren't under their affiliate program. So it's exciting, and they have a whole system. It's crazy, maybe you're a liquid organic grower and you like bottled nutrients, or if you're a salt grower and you like bottled stuff, they have these pyramids that eventually they go into. So it starts with a plug, and the plugs are small. They're shorter than normal. They're about the normal width. I think they're 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches, something like that. But they're shorter, so they'll sink into normal trays. But then you can transplant those into a cube that they have, and then the cube goes into a pyramid. And it's a really succinct system. We're a living soil system, so we just use their plugs, and we've had incredible success. So I can't say enough.
Yeah, she sent me some of the pyramid, or the thing prior to the pyramid, the next stage up. I think it's a 4-inch, is it? Something like that.
What they call those, the blocks, the Eazy blocks.
Yeah, she sent me a few of the blocks, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm going to try transitioning a few of the peppers into the blocks and some not, see what the difference is. But
be ready to feed around week 1. Like after the first week of them being in there, they'll need, my experience was they'll need a liquid feed of some kind.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. And so now part of the watering thing with plugs and these is that delicacy. You're like, oh, don't wring it out, but what are some really solid practices to make sure we don't overwater? And if we do overwater, what are some mitigation things we can do?
So they look light brown when they dry out. You'll be able to visually tell when they get dry. And it usually happens between day 4 and day 6 if you're using my particular cloning SOPs, which I tend to make available to people if they have any specific questions about things. I don't just drop the whole thing, but if anybody has any questions, they can shoot me a message. But generally we keep water in the bottom tray below the gutters. So the ridges in the tray, in the bottom tray, we keep the water below that, but you do need to have some water in there. And that will kind of act as an insulator if things get a little too dry in there. And then, so day 4 or day 6, you'll start to notice some dry back in there. And I just take the hose. I don't pH the secondary waterings that I do, although Jenny might not like that. She might want us to pH them. But I have so much success with it. But I just take the hose, dude, and drip it over the plugs that are dry, and done deal. Put the dome back on. I usually shake the dome off too. It's probably I tend not to use a napkin or a paper towel because those are not always very sanitary, and you never know what you're wiping onto your dome. So I just take it and I go, put it back on.
Nice. I like it.
Last couple tips before we wrap up here. How should people store these plugs, and do they last? I think I saw on the site that they have like unlimited shelf life, but yeah, what are the tips there?
It's sort of a funny line to dance when you have an organic product that breaks down really quick, and then you have a product that lasts forever on a shelf. The difference is water. Once you add water to these plugs, they begin their breakdown process. So keep them dry. They don't need to be keep them as sterile as possible. I keep mine in the box that they came in with a piece of tape over it. And then when I need it, I open it, I pull them out with a gloved hand, and I put them in the tray, and I start my soak, and then I close it with a piece of tape. They're super simple.
So just as kind of like the wrap up of it all, just to make sure folks are kind of geared for success, what are some of the mistakes that you see people do with the Eazy plugs that might prevent them from having the amazing success we're having?
Not using that.
What's that?
No drybacks. You got to have your drybacks. I mean,
Yeah, you
not
have to.
trying to like allowing those. Then that's probably overwatering, and that's the only time I've seen problems personally.
Yep. So we've seen that. Even that still gets you 80 to 90% success. But excuse me, guys, I'm getting over a cold. But I'd say the biggest, most common problem is probably switching from rock wool, where people tend to keep less water in their bottom tray. They're letting their plugs get a little too dry. This client also was using a dry rooting powder. So it was kind of a 1-2 punch that was drying them out too much. So because they do dry back so well, got to watch out for that dry back. Make sure they don't wilt. You got to keep your eyes on your clones, right? It's an obvious. So that's a big thing. pHing your water, I think, is important, but again, it just makes it a little slower. I think Rob had success even when he doesn't, and I have had too. I don't think I measured how much longer it took, probably a day or two, maybe, but pHing your water is always a way to make sure. It also, see, the pHing your water thing is going to depend on the alkalinity of your water. So it's not strictly just like, what's the pH of your water? It's, well, how much does the pH affect the medium, and how much does it get affected by the medium? And that's actually alkalinity measurement. So how much you need to change the pH depends actually upon your alkalinity. Water test will show you that.
Awesome. Well, I was going to ask you again the site, but I found it. It's qualityhort.com was the site for the home growers can check out.
Yep.
Awesome. Because that's where a lot of our audience just looking at Google or YouTube analytics and stuff like that. Yeah.
Also Clutch Roots. Check clutchroots.com. I think that's their other, maybe more direct. I think she's more recently told me that one, actually. So check that too. And then, yeah, and I just wanted to make it clear to everybody that they're very approachable on Instagram.
Nice. She's very nice.
I have to step off, you guys. I got to go into a meeting. I was supposed to be in at 5 o'clock, so I got to jump out early. I just want to say man. Thank you for having me on.
Well, give us a shout out where people can find you real fast before you dip.
Seattle Chronic Seeds on Instagram, seattlechronic-seeds.com on the web. You can find seeds at Seeds Here Now, Neptune Seed Bank, or you can just reach out to me through an email, seattlechronic-seeds@gmail.com. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Best seeds on the planet. Best breeder on the planet. I shit you not.
Thanks, brother.
Later, dude. Love you too, man.
Appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I just was checking it out. Clutchroots.com does have the stuff up there. They've got an Eazy plug starter kit for like $45, it looks like, and you can click the buy button right there. So that's cool. No hoops to jump through or whatever it is.
Perfect.
We're getting a tour of Rab's house. I'm just gonna remove him from the thing. There we go.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, we really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you so much for talking us through. This is going to be really helpful as folks get ready for the outdoor grow season, or they just want to step up the cloning and seed game. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Eazy Plugs, and they're a great product. I give Jenny a lot of credit for even letting me talk. She had no idea what I was going to say today. She just knew that I had success and sent me out here, and so yeah, I appreciate you guys giving me that time. You can find my stuff at atgacres.com or atgacres on Instagram, and my seeds are also available at atgacres.com. And if you have any questions about that wild hemp that I found, shoot me a DM. That's a really fun story.
Awesome. Well, JR, thanks for putting together today's episode. Thanks for obviously your time. Thanks for JR for your time. Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to follow these guys online. Check out the sites. The products looks really cool. So I hope folks check it out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Leave a comment on YouTube and on Spotify. We'd love to see what you guys think over there. Like and subscribe, all the other things. Click the links in the description. And as always, JR,
Growers love.
Growers love.
Thanks for hanging out.